Hello, everyone. It's always great to be here. But sometimes I can't help but feeling a slight sense of deja vu, because what often happens at these News Next events is Rajdeep starts off by saying all that's wrong with the industry. Barkha follows on. Bhupendra comes in and says his bit about the things that are going wrong. And then I come up out here talking about how AI and other things are going to be used to transform all of this, right? So it's a bit of a script which I'm going to try and deviate from just a little bit to talk about something slightly different. But before I do that, let me just refer to some of what we have heard before. And yes, it is true. The industry is in crisis. Yes, it is true that there are things that are going wrong. And we have to find a solution to it. Because, as we've heard before, it is perfectly true that biased news, opinionated news, views is what works. Journalism should be about being balanced, should be about being unbiased, should be about being credible. It should be about telling people what's actually happening out there. That's the reason all of us got into journalism. Doesn't quite work that way, unfortunately. TRPs come not from being factual and correct and telling the accurate picture. TRPs come from being opinionated, from having people shouting and screaming at each other in studios. That's where TRPs come from. Digital media, which many of us thought would be the solution, also didn't work in the manner that we had hoped it would, because like TRPs come from that, biased news, opinionated news, shouting and screaming, clicks also seem to come from that same thing. And that's because we live in a tribal society. We click on things, we like things, we watch things, we retweet things, if it matches what we actually believe in. That's just the way things are happening. And therefore, you've been hearing me saying this the last 5 years. None of this is a particularly big surprise, by the way. We have known that this is the state of the industry, and this is the way that the industry is moving. Not today. We've known it for 5 or 6 years. You don't believe me? Rewind to, I think, a very similar address that I would have given 5 years ago or 6 years ago when I actually quit television news way back in, 2016, 2017 to set up Editorji. And if you play back what I was saying at News Next, roughly around that time, 2018, all of this was said. Where the solutions need to come on also was said. So I'm not going to repeat myself, I promise you, too much right now. If you really want to see it, you can see that. In a nutshell, though, one of the things that I have always believed in is that new ecosystems will need to be created. Yes, this is a tough time. This is a bad time for journalism. It is a bad time because what is good journalism is not necessarily rewarded economically in revenue terms. Good journalism, the stuff that we all believe in, be factual, be correct, tell the true story, it doesn't get rewards economically. Will that be the situation forever? I hope not. Will there be new paths that will be found? I hope so. And therefore, a quick update, that's really what we've been trying to do at Editorji, try and find new ecosystems, try and find ways in which you can use technology, use AI to try and build the ecosystems of the future. And so before I go forward into what I'm here to talk about, why I'm out on the field again reporting, I will give you a couple of quick updates on how that is going. From an Editorji point of view, we've now got a full-time CEO, which is great, someone who's moved, Nitin Chopra, moved from Meta to come in and to build this. And we are going to be scaling that. We're going to be scaling that with the RPSG group very aggressively in the next year, 2 years, hopefully trying to find a new ecosystem that will point a direction for the way this can move. And I'll find another occasion to talk about that greater length. So now that I have a full-time CEO taking care of Editorji, that's great, which is why I have had the chance to get back now to doing something that I truly love, which is returning to the field. And for once, therefore, at Newsnext, Ruhail, with your permission, I'm not going to do the usual stuff about talking about the business models and about why TRPs are so bad and how AI is going to solve all of these problems. I'm going to talk about something else that is intrinsic to the cause of journalism, which is getting out into the field and actually telling the story which is out there. We all talk about how balance has gone. Yes, that's a problem. But something else that seems to have increasingly started to disappear from journalism is actually getting your hands and your feet dirty. Going out into the field, going out into the fields, getting mud on your shoes, finding out what's happening on the ground. What's happened to that journalism? I'll tell you what's happened to that journalism. Like with balance, like with the lack of bias, it doesn't pay. Why would companies, why would television channels, why would other people invest in the time and the effort and the money to travel around, to go into the interiors, to take camera crews around, to try and find out ki zamini hakikat kya hai, when it is so much simpler, so much cheaper, so much more rewarding in financial terms, unfortunately, to just sit in a television studio, get two spokespeople in, and ask them to shout at each other. Shout at them also. You know, do some yelling and screaming. It works. You get TRPs from that. But why are you going to go out into the interiors? You know how hot it is out there. You know how uncomfortable it is out there. Driving around, rattling around. Okay, the roads are much better than they once used to be. Why would you do it? But the answer is, if you don't do it, how are you really finding out what the stories are? So that's a real challenge. And by the way, I have to tell you that, in a sense, the liberation I felt in the last, I've already done 1,000 kilometers, by the way. Amroha, Rampur, Muradabad. I was in Dosa 2 days ago, 3 days ago with Sachin Pilot, with Bhupinder Yadav in Alwar 2 days ago. And I can tell you those questions are asked everywhere that I have gone, and I have met people and I have spoken to them. I was with Mehboob Ali in where was I? That Amroha, about a week ago. And he asked me a question that I must say all of us have to sit and think about a little bit. He said, "Bhai, aap log sab patrakar kyun bane the?" He said, "पत्रकारिता का मतलब होना चाहिए कि आप लोग यहाँ आए, क्षेत्र में आए, ज़मीनी हकीकत की जानकारी पता लगाने की कोशिश करें। पर आप लोग क्या करते हैं? अगर आप पत्रकार हैं, आप क्या करते हैं? आप स्टूडियो में बैठ के नफरत फैलाते हैं या स्पोक्स पीपल से बात करते हैं। ये पत्रकारिता कैसी हुई?" And I didn't have a real answer to him, because what he said is correct. And I know why it's happening is because there's no business model. Now, I know it's very, in a sense, many of you will look and say, yeah, it's all very well for you to say you had your own company, you sold your own company, you have the luxury of now going out into the field. You even got yourself a CEO to run the company. So now you can do it. You can get out into the field and report. And that is true. Maybe I have to say that I'm lucky to get a chance to get back to doing what I once loved. But I do want to say, the question that Barkha was asking a little earlier, that Rajdeep was referring to, would you have got back into journalism? Would you have done journalism if you are starting right now? I think what the last couple of weeks have shown me, and hopefully I will still feel the same way after the next 2 months, I'm now again being reminded of why I did this 30 years ago. Why did I get into journalism? And that is the passion that all of you who are young people out here thinking about getting into the profession, I will tell you, that is where the true high will come from. That is where the true excitement will come from. When you do what is difficult and uncomfortable and go out there and report from the ground, that is the ultimate high in journalism. It is not being a studio anchor. It is not sitting in the studio. It's not sitting in comfortable air-conditioned studios. I think I said it in one of the first piece to cameras that I did on this entire series, when I said, अगर आपको चुनावी विश्लेषण करना है, तो आप air-conditioned studio से नहीं कर सकते हैं. आपको क्षेत्र में आना ही पड़ेगा. And I think that's where you will eventually find the high in that. Now that's, how do you do it? How do you do it? I get back to that question, because unfortunately, with journalism in India, what we all know to be correct eventually bumps up against the business model. Where do TRPs come from? Where does the revenue come from? Where does advertising come from? Where do the clicks come from? Sensationalism, hysteria, bias, clickbait, tabloid stuff. That's what the business model is telling you. And I'm afraid we're looking in various directions, but at the end of the day, the issue right now is that the business model rewards bad journalism, not good journalism. That's just the way the business model is. Now we're going to try and change that. I keep on promising you this year after year that there will be efforts made to change that. And I'll tell you where that change may come from. And this is the hope for the future. Look, we are heading for a world where the business of creating content will increasingly become commoditized. And it's going to happen with AI if nothing else, for example. Within a year or within 2 years. I was actually here on this stage about 2 months ago, 3 months ago, in a gathering very similar to this, and I said AI is going to be able to do a lot of content creation. The content creation that you think you can do as journalists, AI is going to be able to do a lot of it, right, for you very quickly. And somebody very correctly on the panel said, yes, but that'll be in text, not necessarily in video. And a week after that, Sora came, right, which enables you to do a lot of video by AI. The nutshell is going to be that within a year or 2 years, the task of content creation will not necessarily be the prerogative of media channels or established journalists, because somebody is sitting in their dorm room, a young kid sitting in a dorm room will be able to use AI to actually create stories and produce them really well and do that great. So if content creation is not going to be the preserve of established, quote unquote, journalists or media houses, what is going to be important then? And our view at Editorji, for example, and others may have the similar view, is that the real differentiation will come from curation, from the credibility that comes by saying, I trust this person to tell me what is happening. Trust, credibility, and therefore curation. The belief that this is somebody who will tell me what the truth is, that may eventually become the differentiating factor in an AI-driven world, where there'll be billions of stories, not hundreds and thousands of stories, there'll be billions of stories coming at you every single day. How is somebody going to be able to give you the ability to navigate through that? That is going to be the differentiating factor. That's what we're trying to build. And that is where your lack of bias, your ability or your desire to go out into the field could well prove to be the differentiating factor. At least that's my hope. That's where I think things are going to go. That's where I hope things are going to go. And if not, well, then it's great to get out into the field again. I'm not intending to be this to be a farewell speech, but if it is ever to play out that way, I do hope that I will be eventually remembered in this sort of an avatar and not in a suit and a tie, because this is what real journalism to my mind is. Thank you.